Hello and welcome to the video for 5th grade for April the 10th on Friday. So our video for today is going to be covering working with graphing data. So way back in 3rd grade, we did something similar to the experiment that they wanted us to do here. If we were at school, we could go ahead and do that. I don't actually have a proper thermometer. I have the kind that you put against your forehead and it will not pick up off of a cup, probably because it only wants to record a certain temperature range. So I have manufactured data that we can use, and this will fit in really easily with the coordinate plane that we have drawn for us on the next page. So go ahead and copy these values down. And we're just saying that every 10 seconds, the water cools by 5 degrees. That's probably not realistic in every situation, but if we're using a tiny paper cup with 3 ice cubes that are going to fill up most of the volume of the cup, it could possibly happen. So again, one of these tiny cups, filling it up with water and putting 3 large ice cubes in, could probably cool it significantly in a minute, but probably not 30 degrees worth. But let's pretend that that was what it was. And let's go ahead and look at our questions that go along with it. So number 1, explain why you would record the beginning temperature. Well, we are trying to figure out how well the ice cools the water, or how much the water is cooled by the ice. So something that follows along with that. So number 2, I want you to pause the video and think of, after I'm done with this, describe what's going to happen to the temperature of the water in 60 seconds during the experiment. Okay? So during the experiment part, we should expect that the water gets cooler. Now, for the third one, if the water is going to get cooler during 60 seconds, I want you to explain what you think could happen to the temperature if we continued the experiment for another 60 seconds. So again, go ahead and pause the video and think about what you would go ahead and put down for that, and then unpause the video when you're ready. So depending on what you think the maximum temperature that the ice could cool the water to, we could have one of two things happen. Either it could continue cooling the water until it gets to the point where the ice is going to, as the ice cools the water is also, in a sense, having a similar effect on the ice. So at some point, the ice is going to melt completely, and there is going to be a temperature that we will not be able to get the water below because the ice will have melted by that point, and it will not continue bringing the temperature of the water down. Now, whether that will happen in 60 seconds or not, if we're starting with room temperature water, it's probably not going to happen. But it could possibly happen during the second minute, depending on how much ice there is compared to how much water. So that is a kind of short way of explaining that. So I want you to kind of think about that. We did kind of talk about that with our science lesson where we were doing something similar where we had the water already full with ice, and then we tracked the temperature over a couple hours as the water gradually warmed back up toward room temperature. And that was back in 3rd grade. So making connections. So now we're going to take the information that we had on the very first page, and we are going to plot this into our graph. So I picked nice, easy numbers to work with. That way we can be able to just count by 5s on our coordinate plane. Originally, I was thinking, it might drop about 2.5 degrees. Well, now we're working in the half spaces here. And for learning how to do this, it's probably easier if we're working with things that match the set values along the side for the graph. So 0, 70. So 0 is how far left or right we are going to be, which is our first number in our ordered pair. 70 is going to be how far up we go, and we are going to draw in a dot there. Then we are going to go over to the 10, and then we are going to go up to 65 and fill in a dot there. Then we go to 20, 60. So assuming that it stays changing at a regular interval each time, we will end up with a straight line that happens to be a diagonal. So once we get over to 40, we're going to be at the 50-degree mark. Uh, 50 seconds, we are going to be at the 45-degree mark. And then 60 degrees, we are going to be at the 40-degree mark. Now, if you remember from science, putting a couple cubes of water in ice, oh, I see where I made a mistake here. I had one of those too far over. There we go. We are not going to be able to cool water all the way down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit because the freezing point of water would be up here at about 32 degrees. So the lowest temperature that we can expect to have by adding white ice to the water would be to actually freeze it, which is probably not actually going to happen. Especially not in this particular situation. We would have to do something a little bit more drastic with a lower temperature than the temperature of ice to be able to get the temperature down far enough. But we would have a nice straight line. So if I were to do what we might do in a later year, we're not going to do that just yet, but they may ask us to draw a line to connect all of our dots. So if I had done that part, my straight line that graphs that could look something like that. But for right now, they just want the points. Sometime next year in 6th grade, they will ask you to add this particular part in if they don't at some point in the near future on one of the other lessons that we haven't gotten to yet. So let's take a look at our Sharon Show. So we are going to start by writing ordered pairs. So this part should be fairly easy. What we are going to do is make our age be the first number because that's going to go along our x-axis on our graph. The bottom number for height is going to be the y-axis, and what we would end up doing is we put them in parentheses. So our first one would be 1, 30, and then we would keep going. So 2, 35, 3, 38, 4, 41, 5, 44. I'm not going to take the time to write all of those out. Just grabbing the second one real quick. This ordered pair tells us that at 3 years old, he was 30 inches high. So number 3, why would the point 642 be nonsense? So if I am continuing and I'm counting up by years, and I'm counting up, even though I have a different amount that I'm counting up, what would be wrong with having this number here? So pause the video if you need a few seconds to think about that. Sorry, that number isn't correct. It should be 42. But same idea. So if that ends up accidentally giving you a hint, the reason why, again, pause if you need to work on this. If you're ready, go ahead and keep listening. Why this would not work is we're not going to shrink. We're not going to get a year older and then shrink, not at this age. There are some ideas that it's possible much later on in life, even further along than I am, that you could lose a little bit of height because of like your spine compressing in and so forth over the years. But we are not going to lose 2 full inches of height probably during our entire lifetime of that process happening. And if we did it, we would be well into our 70s or 80s or possibly even 90s before we would see that. We're not going to see 2 levels or 2 inches of shrinking in 1 year in normal circumstances. So If we were to graph all of these points, which they did ask us to do, our graph could look like this. So our first one would be 30 and 1. Now they don't give a value for 0. If they don't give a value for 0, then we don't have to worry about that. We would make our line starting wherever it gives us, and then we would keep going. 2 years is going to give us 25. 3 years is going to give us 38, which is going to be kind of in a half space here. So I'm going to say that that would be about the midpoint or just above. So halfway between 35 and 40 would be 37 and a half. So if you just kind of scooch it up a little bit. 4 would be at 41, which should be just a little bit above where the blue lines would meet. And then 5 would be 44, which would be just below this blue line. So we are not going to have a straight line. We started, we grew 5 inches, and then after that we should have something that looks closer to being a diagonal because we're growing 3 inches a year. So let's take a look at, actually that was everything for that. My next page is the homework. So this part will be coming to you very shortly. I believe I asked you guys to do both problems on the front. I am going to give you both problems on the thing. So if I only circled number 2, I don't think I did because there was only 2 problems. If I did, please understand that I will go over problem number 1 as well in the video for the homework, which I will be recording in a few moments. So I will see you in the next video.